Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, and with me tonight is my co-host, retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good. Let me just shut my volume off on my other computer. Yes, I'm doing good, Billy. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about our guest tonight, and I think I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. It's Lou Velozi, and he's a retired ATF agent, extraordinary career. And I'm really excited to have him on the show tonight because we're family law enforcement, and he's also a Queens guy, so he's
Queens in the house.
Savannah, Georgia, by way of Queens. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our police off the cuff song. We'll come right back with Lou Velozi.
It's a show with two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. Maybe the best thing you can do.
Phil, a subscriber asked us to do a tribute tonight. A guy named John Donahue. He asked us, an officer was killed on the 14th of this month in a small town called Covington, Virginia, and his cousin is the chief of police there. And that little small town is taking it very hard that they lost one of their officers. That's a picture of the officer on the screen. He's a Marine. He's the father of 4 kids. He's only 35 years old, and he only had 1 year on the job. Phil, you want to read the tribute to him?
Sure, Billy. Police officer Caleb Ogilvy was shot and killed while responding to a domestic disturbance call at a convenience store at 121 North Allegheny Avenue in Covington at about 4:47 p.m., as you said, Billy, on the 14th. The Covington Division of Police and Allegheny County Sheriff's Office, upon being alerted to the suspect's erratic behavior inside the store, immediately responded to the scene. As Officer Ogilvy and an Allegheny County deputy arrived, the subject came out of the store armed with a pistol and opened fire on the officers. Officer Ogilvy and the subject were both fatally wounded during the subsequent exchange of gunfire. Once the scene was secure, it was discovered the suspect had shot and killed a male relative inside the store. The female relative was not injured. Both employees of the business married to one another and related to the suspect. Officer Ogilvy was a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and had served with the Covington Division of Police for less than a year. He's survived by his wife and 4 children, and Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia acknowledged his heroic efforts of Caleb Ogilvy on Twitter. It was just a real hard one, Billy. He's only on the job about a year, 4 children, and this domestic incident gone bad at this farm and fuel gas station led to the deaths of, obviously, as we stated, 3 people and this hero police officer. Rest in peace, brother in blue.
To Christopher Smith, the chief of the Covington Police, and to all your officers, we sympathize with you, and all I can say is Semper Fi and Fidelis ad mortem.
Absolutely.
Happening too often. Lou Velozi, I got the last part of it. So great to have you on the show. Lou, you have a trailer for your book, and I'm going to play it because it's actually pretty cool. And I'm going to put that on the screen, and then we'll get into talking to you. I know you're probably chomping at the bit to talk to us, but here we go.
Betrayal was my job. As an undercover agent, betraying people is your job. And it's something you have to live with, but usually not a difficult thing to live with, because the people you're betraying are committing serious crimes. My name is Lou Velozi. I'm originally from New York. I was a federal agent for 26 years. I became an undercover agent for the last 2 decades of my career. My calling card as an undercover agent became storefront operations. Undercover stings, where we would set up fictitious businesses. These businesses were owned and operated by the government, using undercover federal agents as the owners and employees of these operations, with the purpose of making those communities we were in safer communities by purchasing crime guns out of the hands of the criminals that were using. We received a call from the chief of police in Statesboro, Georgia, and he said, man, we are having problems here in Statesboro. They were starting to have home invasions. They were starting to have a lot of armed robberies. The drug dealing was out of control. They were starting to see national gangs. Could you do one in our city? So we did.
Lou, very cool. Very cool,
Impressive.
man. You know something?
Thank you.
I mean, just watching that, I get the chills, man. You're a hero. And guys that do this kind of undercover work, it's so dangerous. But the results that you guys get for the communities that you go into, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's, when you're able to, as law enforcement, when we're able to put one of our own assets, inside the criminal element, in whatever community we're trying to make safer, to me, it is the greatest investigative tool. What is better than having one of us actually on the inside, getting real-time information and collecting evidence directly from, these perpetrators. So, I was addicted, man. I was an undercover guy. I couldn't stop doing it.
Being an undercover, we had the dean of all undercovers in the world. And to me, he'll always be the dean. And that's Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco. And I mean, what he did, and you know what he did. And I'm not trying to undermine what you did. What you did was amazing, but he was living the life. He was living the life of a wise guy, and but what you did, buying guns, is always super dangerous. And you want to talk about how you ingratiated yourself into these communities, and you got these gangbangers and these drug dealers and these criminals to trust you.
Yeah, I kind of fell into these storefront operations. I started out my undercover career like most guys do. I was in alleyways and in the restroom of a fast food restaurant, buying guns from convicted felons, making small dope buys, kind of quick hits, nickel and dime stuff. And an informant would introduce me to a felon or to a gangbanger, and I'd buy some dope or buy some guns from them. That's how I started. That's how I got my feet wet. That's how most of us started. And then I wanted to get on that more into the national scene of doing these long-term infiltrations. That was my goal. And with ATF, there was a lot of opportunity. I did some of the biker cases. I went undercover with the outlaw motorcycle gangs. I did murder for hires. I did gang infiltrations. I was traveling around the country doing these different kinds of infiltrations. I did a mafia infiltration up in Chicago. And I just got a phone call from a guy because I never said no. So if people needed undercover work done, they'd call me. And he said, hey, we're going to do a storefront operation up here in Augusta, Georgia. Do you want to jump in? And I said, sure. I didn't even really know what a storefront was. And 12 months later, we had bought 430 crime guns off the streets of Augusta. And I was hooked, man. I saw that compared to, a lot of times I'd be out for 12 months to 24 months working on one or two guys. Right. And at the end, you got one or two guys off the street. Here we'd get 100 federal defendants, 400 guns in a 12-month operation. ATF had never seen results like this. And in that operation in Augusta, it was called Augusta Inc. It was a tattoo shop. That's what really started all this. And it was actually the local police in Augusta, Georgia, who were the ones who really kicked it off. We came in, for to do the undercover and to help out with the money. And then I just kind of took it from there and did a whole series of them. And with every operation, we kind of had an evolution. Every operation got a little bigger and better after that, to the point where by the end, we were infiltrating criminal organizations, Bolivian gun smugglers. So it just really worked out well.
Lou, talk a little bit about living the part and understanding the criminal element, understanding the lingo, understanding how not to react when something happens. Like, you can't react like a cop. You got to react like a criminal. Talk about that a little bit.
I tell you what, Bill, at the beginning, I didn't understand the lingo. And so the approach I took at the beginning, it was actually my first biker case. Was with the outlaw motorcycle gang in Atlanta, Georgia. And the only reason I got picked for that gig, because one of the task force agents, there was two undercovers, an ATF agent and an ATF task force. When they got invited down to Bike Week in Daytona, and they were going to do a ride with the outlaws, the sheriff's department, the task force officer was with, said, listen, we didn't sign up for all this. And they pulled their guy out. So he needed a partner. Well, I was the only other guy in the Atlanta field division who had a motorcycle license. I didn't get picked for my skill. I got picked because I had a motorcycle license on my undercover license. So when they first brought, the first thing I did when they brought me up there was I dumped the undercover Harley Davidson they gave me, because I really didn't even know how to ride a motorcycle. I'd never ridden a Harley before. And, the informants, after I dumped the bike, they were like, this is the guy, we're going to take this guy into the outlaws clubhouse. He can't even ride a motorcycle. And so what I did, and I didn't know their culture. I knew nothing about them. I had just kind of been inserted. So luckily, the first time they brought us in, the informants, they brought us into the clubhouse, there wasn't a lot of guys there. The president was there, maybe 5 or 6 other guys. I watched them. I stayed quiet. I watched them for about 10 or 15 minutes. I saw how they carried themselves, and I went right up to the president and I said, listen, I said, with all due respect, I said, I don't know your culture. I don't know your rules, and I don't want to offend anybody. I want to learn. I'm here to learn. I want to become one of you someday, and I want you to teach me. And they loved that. I appealed to his ego, and so he saw a young big dude who he could mold, and he took to that. Because if I had gone in there and tried to act like a tough guy outlaw biker, they would have saw through me right away. And that taught me to hold back. And and I played that my whole career. I am who I am. I was just a hustler, and I didn't try to become someone else. I just played my own role and kind of stepped back and made the bad guys want to be a part of my hustle. That was always my technique.
Go ahead, Phil.
What I was going to say was, that's pretty funny, because when we had Joe Pistone on the show, he basically said almost the same thing that you said verbatim. He said that, I wasn't trying to be somebody else. I was trying to be me, but in that world and in that life. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what works. But Lou, you brought up something that was going to be my first question. I'm kind of like, I believe in statistics and numbers or facts, so to speak. And you brought up the fact that you'd be working on cases for a year or 18 months and recover, one defendant or 2 defendants and just a handful of guns. This sounded like it was really, really successful in taking, firearms off the street.
Man, I mean, we made impacts. We made serious impacts in these places where we worked. And I'll give you the best example I can give you of that is one of the most rewarding phone calls I ever got was one of the detectives who had, he was in the cover room the whole time during this storefront. And he called me about 2 years later, and I was already onto another operation, working another operation. He said, "Hey man, listen, I just got to tell you." He goes, "Our narco guys, they have nothing to do." He said, "Our violent crime guys have very little to do." He goes, there's very little crime right now in our city." He goes, "All the dope dealers and the gun guys, everyone's worried that everyone else is a Fed. No one's doing anything." He goes, "Our crime rate is it's the lowest it's ever been." So to me, that's impact. 2 years later, the bad guys are still afraid that, to go deal their dope, because they're worried about who's a Fed and who's not a Fed, because they just saw all 100 of their boys get locked up. That's an impact on a society. That's meaningful change.
That's the impact of proactive policing that Bill and I
Yeah.
have been talking about it for the last year or so with all the uptick in crime, not only in New York, but throughout the country. But we've been citing it in New York. And until they turn their ways to be proactive and, you know, start proactive policing, you're not going to see the crime tick down. I mean, Mayor Adams in New York, he's had 3 months in the office and he came back with some, you know, form of an anti-crime that's in uniform now. And, you know, they made a couple of collars, but I mean, every single day there's more shootings and more shootings, and it's really out of control. So a policy like what you guys were involved in the ATF obviously had an impact. And like that detective that called you, I mean, crime was down based on one operation. So, you know, you go into a bigger city, New York or California or Chicago, you could probably have multiple operations and really turn things around.
We did, you know, and we did that. And, you know, like you said, you guys, proactive policing, you know, we're never going to win the war. Like you talk to the DEA guys, you know, the war on drugs is lost. You know, even it's not the war on guns is lost, right? I mean, there's just millions of them out there on the street, crime guns. But what we did through proactive policing was we kept everyone looking over their shoulder, right? You know, when you're taking the trigger pullers off the street, when you're taking at least targeting the baddest of the bad, and they're seeing their counterparts get pulled off the street and they're, you know, a 25-year sentence, you keep them looking over their shoulders. I don't think they're looking over their shoulders anymore.
No, you know, Lou, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book is how the entire criminal element in the town or the city that you were working in, they were coming in and selling you everything. They were selling you kilos of cocaine. They were selling stolen cars. They were selling cigarettes you got involved in. Of course, guns. I mean, the impact of those storefront stings was tremendous. And it's like, it's you know, when I read how they don't do it anymore, I was like, this is this is policing in America. The whole anti-police movement, it hit the ATF too. And it's outrageous. This can really make a town, a city, a state much safer because of what you guys were doing.
Yeah, it's a shame, you know, the ATF Enhanced Undercover program. I might be biased, but you know, we have the greatest undercovers in the world, in my opinion. And I worked with the greatest undercovers in the world. And you know, I'm not saying that the men and women in there now, you know, they're not. I'm not saying that they're not as good as we were, but they don't have the opportunity. They're not allowed to do it, so we'll never know. You know, you know, during the 90s and early 2000s, we were cowboys, man. They let us run and gun, and we were just knocking them off. And it's just not happening anymore. So they don't have the opportunity. We still have an undercover program, but they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to do what we did.
You know, Lou, I always said even the greatest homicide investigators are the cities where they have the greatest amount of homicides. You know, probably the best investigators right now is probably Chicago, because homicides are off the cuff, and Miami, it's off the charts. Now New York, they're going to get back to the old days because they're getting tons of homicides. But you get better at it, as you know, the more you do it, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. The NYPD guy, the LAPD guys, Chicago PD guys. I mean, those are the guys everyone looks up to. All right. They're the ones who they wrote the book because, like you said, day after day after day, they're just doing it nonstop. So you're going to get good at it. And if you're not good at it, you know, you're going to get siphoned out of there. Right.
You know, Lou, I got to tell you, in the NYPD, as of late in the last couple of years, all the uniform guys, all the enforcement guys, so to speak, their hands are really tied. If you put your hands on somebody, the cell phones come out, it's on television, you're on the 6 o'clock news, you wind up suspended, God forbid, criminal charges. But the detective bureau that seems to mop up the mess, specifically in New York, every time there's a major shooting, a tourist gets shot, or any kind of a homicide that it's newsworthy, the NYPD comes through. And even with the restrictions on them now, you know, there's a lot of restrictions with cameras and all these different things, but they're still able to, thank God for the technology, that they can come up with plate readers, spot shooter, cell phone technology is just unbelievable. A lot of cases are being solved. And then there are video cameras, surveillance cameras, security cameras, just about everywhere. So that's like one of the big things. We were talking about it recently on one of our other podcasts, how in our time, Billy and I, and probably you, before all of this stuff, there was a lot of legwork that went into it, and then interview and interrogation. It's a proud moment when a detective can go into a room with a guy that's denying he committed a murder, and after some time, be able to use interview and interrogation techniques and get that guy to confess. It's really, a very satisfying feeling. And I've said it many times, standing over a dead body with a notepad, not knowing who did it. And then sometime later, you have the person in handcuffs and you're sure that that's the person. There's no better gratification for a detective. And again, for you as an undercover to go into these places, it's super dangerous. I mean, you're not dealing with guys that are, shoplifting, deodorant and batteries out of a CVS. This is real time. These guys are dealing in heavyweight. They're gun traffickers, they're narcotics traffickers, motorcycle gangs. Most people, general public, not talking about law enforcement, shy away from people like that. If a biker comes rolling down the street, most people are going to turn the other way. You guys are getting in there and infiltrating it. I got to tip my hat to you. That's really probably one of the most dangerous things that any law enforcement officer can do, because at any moment while you're in there, if they suspect that you're the police, you're the popo, that could be lights out, God forbid,
Lou, one of the things that I wanted to mention also is that, and we probably, Phil and I both struggled with this too. Work was so much fun and so interesting that we never wanted to go home lots of times. And you had that same thing with these undercover operations. You knew you were neglecting your family, and yet you still couldn't pull yourself away from your job. And that's an interesting thing. And I know maybe you have some regrets. I don't know your history after that, but there's always regrets to that. But it's so intoxicating, the job and the
100%.
work, that you don't want to go home. It's crazy, right?
Probably the same way you guys had it, like in the detective bureau. We had it. Our crew of undercovers. You would hear about, one of your guys, let's say, this guy out in Arizona, the word would come out, hey man, he just wrapped up his case. He got 40 defendants, 100 guns, whatever, 100 kilos of coke. And so you'd have kind of two reactions to that. One, my first one is, I'm proud, man, right? That guy's on my team, right? Great job. And I'm proud. And my second reaction was, oh, I could do better than that. Right. I can one up on that. And so there was a competition among us. I'm not going to say it was healthy, because it wasn't, because we were never going home. But, as soon as you'd hear someone did one thing, you'd say, oh man, I can top that. Right. And we jump in and try to do something even bigger and better. And who pays for that? Your family, right? Your friends, like that's who pays the price for that, because man, you're so wrapped up into it. As you guys know, you get so wrapped up into it. You think you're saving the world, and what you're really doing is you're losing your priorities about what's really important.
100%. We always used to say, like, when a guy was so gung-ho in his first year or two, he'd say, hey, you got 18 years left to do this shit. Go home, You got 18 or whatever you want to stay on. You want to stay on till you're 63? Go home now, You got to have both parts of your life taken care of, not just your job, right?
Billy, I want to make a point about something you said, how it's addictive. Before we went on the air, I was talking about that homicide case where I had 4 perpetrators and I was up for 3 days straight. And you're so right. I was single at the time, so it was probably a little bit easier. I didn't have a family. I had parents and stuff like that. But, it was my case. And when the first perp dropped and, then I was up for 2 days. And then when the third perp, we knew where he was, they were like, other guys from the homicide team and guys from my office were going to go out. And I was like, no, they were allowing me to go home if I wanted, because I was up for 2 days. I said, nope, it's my case. How could I go home and sleep knowing that, they were out getting the third bad guy on a 4 perp homicide? I wouldn't have slept anyhow. So you're right, though. It's addictive. And there's a lot of times when I investigated cases, you go home for the night, you go into the rack at the precinct and you're trying to, catch a few hours of shut eye, and your brain, I talk to this person and what are we going to do next? And it just stays with you until case closed or case solved, So I would imagine the same thing happens to you guys, Lou, when you're doing the undercover work, because there's so many moving parts to it for you guys too. I mean, you had a team of guys in your storefronts, no?
Oh yeah, there was always a team, a different undercover team. It was a mistake that I was usually the case agent and the lead undercover, which is not a good move. It's not recommended. I don't think they even allow it anymore. But once I learned how to do it, and I learned what I was doing, the smart guys who work undercover, they put in about 4 or 5 years, and then they get out and they go do something else. Those are the smart guys. But the way I looked at it, after about 4 or 5 years, man, I finally knew what the hell I was doing. And now I'm in my prime, right? And so there was no way I was stopping. So I kept going. I never stopped, because at the expense of my personal life, my professional life was off the charts. I was making these cases and bringing in these numbers of guns that ATF had never seen before. And so they weren't going to stop me or slow me down, because they loved the results. And it just snowballed. Same as a detective, just solving one homicide after the other. We just keep going, because it's adrenaline, right?
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed to us, please go on your YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. And if you want to support us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And you see the folks in the chat with the green font. They're part of our YouTube family, and we have 5 different levels on that. You can join that and be part of the Police Off the Cuff YouTube family. Lou, it's funny. Even my wife to this day says, "Oh, you were never home then." And I'm like, hey, well, I was making a living, my kids never wanted for anything. I took care of them, you know what I mean? But my wife worked too, so she can slap that back in my face,
Talking about not being home after 9/11, for 2
yeah.
years straight, I was in the intelligence division, and I had 2 small children at home, and I was working the first 2 months. We worked 7 days a week, like 16-hour days, and then it went down to 6 days a week. And so for those 2 years, I did 1,000 hours overtime my last 2 years on the job post 9/11, which was 2000, 2001, 2002, and then going into 2003, I was on track for another banner year, but then things started to calm down. So yeah, I could relate to that, Billy, the not being home.
I'm sure if my wife was listening, she would hate the imitation I did of her just then.
There is no good imitation.
No, none of a woman. She'd be like, "Don't you ever do that." Oh, I'm doing it again.
Yeah. Lou, I gotta tell you, I gotta indulge you for a quick story, but I think it's gonna relate right to what you do. I have a very, very close friend of mine, a retired Lieutenant Joe Calderera, saved my life. I saved his life. We were both in that crime together, but he went off to narcotics, and they were doing a major case. Guys in his team were doing a major case with these Israeli drug dealers. So if Joe opens his mouth, you in 2 seconds you say gangster or cop, because he exudes that Italian from Brooklyn. So during the case, the undercover had to introduce his boss. He was claiming to be part of organized crime. They were selling major amounts of heroin and cocaine to these, from Israelis going to organized crime guys. So Joe meets them at a club, and he grabs the head guy, and he puts, "Hey, how the hell you doing?" When he's got a cigar in his mouth. And they loved Joe Cal. He had a fictitious name, but they loved him. They partied. They were drinking. They were in this club in the city that everybody went to. All the gangsters were there. Regimes, I think it was. Anyways, long story short, they take the case down, and they bring them back to the narcotics office. And Joe Cal walked in. Now, these guys, it was like 6 guys, I think it was 5 or 6 guys, and they had them handcuffed to the desks and stuff, and they were processing them. And they were like, they were like crying in their hands just about. And when Joe walked in, the main guy, the lead guy, looked at him. He goes, "No, not you. It can't be. It can't be." Because they were so convinced that he was like a mob guy. And they just flipped out. When Joe tells me the story, he could tell it to me 10 times. I'm peeing every time. Did you ever have anything like that happen? Did you wind up after you locked these guys up? Did you have stories like that?
I did. I didn't enjoy that moment. The burn moment. I never wanted to be around for that. I like to do my job and get out of town. I really didn't want to face these guys afterward. I got enjoyment out of that burn moment. My worst one was up in Chicago, my mentor, Chris Bayless, he called me. I was at the tail end of one of my storefront operations, and I was out to dinner with my wife, telling her that, listen, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to slow down. And during that conversation, my phone rings, and it's my guy up in Chicago, and he said, "Listen," and he goes, "I want to try and get you up here and take a run at this guy. He's in the outfit, that's what Chicago calls the mafia, the outfit. He's in the outfit. He's also a member of the Outlaws motorcycle gang. And the FBI has thrown 3 guys at him, and he sniffed them all out. So, and 2 of them were childhood friends. And he sniffed them out. He was a smart guy, real sharp. So, you know, he had a jewelry store in Chicago, and it was just a total front where he was just in the back room. He was meeting with, you know, his mob buddies and the Latin Kings, gangster disciples, you name it, right? Outlaw motorcycle gangs. And so he did have a sign that said, "We buy gold," where in this jewelry store. And so my buddy Chriser bought with ATF money these gold teeth, these gold crowns that still had the teeth in them, all blood stained from his dentist, right? And he put a bunch in a Crown Royal bag, and he sent me to the front door and said, "Just see if you can sell them and start a conversation with this guy." Right? That's how it was. The coldest I've ever started. There was no informant. It was a total cold call. And the guy was super suspicious, right, of everybody. And, you know, my cover was that I was kind of a down and out MMA fighter, kind of a punching bag up there, just, you know, and I got in with the local gym up there. And it was a difficult one. And it went good the first time. I brought more blood-stained gold teeth back. And eventually I got through the door. And but it was a lot of work. And I ended up spending a lot of time with this guy. He ended up getting 60 years. That was the biggest sentence I've ever gotten on a case. And for the takedown at the end of this case, it was actually the only case that I've ever worked with the FBI. It was a joint ATF FBI case because, you know, we don't get along with those guys. And but it worked pretty well.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder. So for the takedown, they wanted me to bring him to the I think it was a Hilton at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and bring him up. And he thought he was going to meet Hoist Gracie, this famous jiu-jitsu guy. And who he was really going to meet was a bunch of ATF and FBI agents who had put all the evidence in boxes in this hotel room because, you know, they wanted to kind of overwhelm him and get him to flip. And I knew from being with this guy for a year, there was no way he was flipping. I knew it. But anyway, so when I brought him, when he showed up with his kid, and I had to bring him up there. And so when they started, after they, you know, badged him and all that, and they started interviewing him, and he wasn't really talking, and he wouldn't believe that I was undercover and was who I said I was. So they were like, "Hey, listen, you got to go in there and show him your badge." And I was like, do I have to? So I did it, you know, and he hadn't said a word. He wasn't talking. And I said, "Listen," I said, I said, "You know, I'm just doing my job. This is my job. This wasn't personal." And he looked up at me, and he looked me in the eyes, and he goes, "What?" He goes, "You're telling me it wasn't personal?" He goes, "You've met my family." He goes, we've broken bread together. We spent time together. I brought you in my circle. You've met my family. Everything you've told me up to right now has been a fucking lie. And you're telling me it wasn't personal?" And, you know, I had no response for that. I mean, I walked out of that room. I had no response for that. And, you know, that's one of those burn moments. And, you know, because if you, as an undercover, especially when you're doing these long terms, man, you know, if you don't feel some of that, you know, you don't have any humanity in you, man, because, you know, not everybody is all bad, you know, and you develop relationships. And even though the guy might be doing a lot of bad stuff, it doesn't mean there's still not something there. You know, this guy was a good father, you know, He was a good, so yeah, I didn't enjoy those moments, man. Like, you know,
Lou, I found that so interesting in reading the book that you didn't want to be there on the day of the takedown
Yeah.
because of the personal relationships that you got into with these criminals. But it's understandable,
Of course.
and to not to keep going back to Joe Pistone, but to me, this was a very interesting question to ask. And we asked him the same thing because and not even, the movie Donnie Brasco, but in real life, he had the guy, Sonny Black, and they were with each other for years and they were tight. In fact, Sonny Black saved Joe Pistone's life. A mugger put a knife to him and Sonny Black knocked the guy out.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I even asked Joe, I said, Joe, after all of that, how did you feel when you had to take them down, And, Sonny Black was the total stand-up guy. He turned
Right.
himself in knowing he was going to get whacked. He just left his jewelry and his car keys with the bartender and went in and got whacked, That's Cosa Nostra.
Right.
Well,
That's Cosa Nostra.
How about what happened with the girlfriend, Billy Postat? I think it was years after the takedown. She actually had a meeting with Joe Pistone, and I believe that he gave a message to the girlfriend to tell Joe Pistone, who was Donnie, that like he didn't hold it against him. He knew he was doing his job. There was some kind of a meeting. Remember that, Bill?
Yeah. Sonny Black told the girlfriend that he had nothing against Joe Pistone, that he knew.
I don't hold it against him.
And basically, you won. Yeah. This was a game, and you won the game. You won.
She actually contacted the FBI and said, I want him. And they said, listen, that doesn't happen. He's, he was an undercover.
No one meets Oz. No one meets him.
Right, exactly.
No one gets to see Oz.
Yeah. But then after, pushing, they contacted Pistone and they said, listen, she wants to talk to you. She's got a message to deliver from, Sonny Black. And he's like, all right. And I think they did it in Washington or something.
Yeah, they did. It was in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And she sat down and she said, look, he told me to tell you that, it's not, he doesn't hold it against you, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I guess, listen, there was a tremendous relationship between Joe Pistone and Michael Franzese, who wound up becoming an informant. We know that Tommy Dades, who's on our show quite a bit, he's like an undercover encyclopedia, not undercover, organized crime encyclopedia in the New York area. He knows every gangster going to before he was born. He's like a real computer when it comes to that stuff. And he's got relationships with a lot of the guys that he flipped. Like, for instance, Jimmy Calandra, Sammy the Bull Gravano. He stays in touch with both of those guys. And those guys, listen, Sammy, he's doing his thing. He made his deal with the government. And, as long as he doesn't break the law, he's entitled to his freedom at this point. And Jimmy obviously wasn't in as far as Sammy was, but Jimmy has really turned his life around. He's got a very successful podcast, and Bill and I were on it about 2 weeks ago. And so the point is, there's relationships between these guys that wound up, Tommy wound up locking these guys up. And
Lou, what he's trying to say is your future is a podcaster.
Yeah.
Your future is to become a podcaster. After all you've done, all the takedowns, now you got to become a podcaster, Lou, I wanted to ask you something, though. I mean, obviously you have a brilliant career. What you did was amazing. What was the scariest moment of your undercover career?
For me, it was always, I was never worried about what they would do if they found out that I was an undercover Fed, because, I look at the data, right? And realistically, if they find out, if they even think it, they're going to put as much distance between themselves and you as they can, them and their organization. They don't want to bring any heat on themselves or their organization. The biggest danger was always that, bad guys kill each other all the time, right? And that because you are believable, and so when you start dealing with, a lot of machine guns or a lot of kilos, and they know you're bringing a lot of money to the deal, even guys you've dealt with 5, 6, 7, 8 times and everything's been fine, on that 9th time, they might just decide, listen, you know what? We know he's showing up with 50 grand. This time we'll just take his money and we'll whack him. And we'll keep our dope or our machine guns or whatever it is. So those were always the bigger deals, were the scariest moments for me. It happened in one of the storefronts. and that part was in the book, Bill, when those guys came in, and there was guys who we had dealt with. We had probably dealt with these guys 5 or 6 times, and everything was, as pleasant as a gun deal can be, right? From gangbanging convicted felons. And, we were square, we were fair on the price. They showed up with what they said they were going to, things had gone well. Well, those same guys that we were dealing with, they came back that night with the ski masks on with guns to, and they're going to shoot us up because they knew we were sitting on a lot of cash at the store. And that was always the biggest danger, those storefronts. Once you start doing a lot of deals, they see all this cash, right? And they're like, okay, maybe we'll take a shot. There's no honor among thieves. I don't care if you've dealt with them 10 times. They'll come back and either rob you or burglarize you that night. And when those guys came in, and I was like, you know what? All this work, we're only about halfway into the storefront. I was like, now I'm about to be in a shootout. And even worse than that, the whole operation shot, right? It's over. And we just really had just gotten hit the ground running. And here's these guys coming in with the ski masks and the guns. But ironically, a defendant that we had hired to work at the store got up and put himself in between us and the guys who were there to rob us, and talked them out of it, talked them down. And that was, and Bill, you read it, that was a huge mistake we had made hiring that guy. And at the end of the case, when we're all like, man, he's going to prison for 20 years, and the guy twice he thwarted armed robberies at that place.
Saved your life, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And his reward was 20 years in federal prison.
So it was Barzini all along.
Yeah, exactly. It was Barzini. That's right.
So he was hired, and he set up the robbery, or he was
No. So Phil, we were buying some dope off of this girl, and she said, hey, my boyfriend has crack. He sells crack. You guys want to deal with him? We said, bring him in, we'll feel him out. And we did. Real nice fella for a crack dealer. And we ended up buying a big quantity off him. And this is when those federal crack statutes were brutal, right? I mean, if a guy had multi-felony convictions and he sold and I think he sold about 6-7 ounces, that's it. He was going for 20 years.
That's A1, yeah.
Yeah. So she came back to us and she said, listen, I know you guys like him and everything went well. He's on parole. As a condition of his parole, he has to be employed. Could he work here at the store?
Oh, I see.
And so we were like, good opportunity, right? Because, we're kind of new faces right here, and we're trying to get in with all the criminals. If we brought in one of their own, a guy they know, and he's sitting behind the counter with us, instant cred, right? And so we did it. And it made the whole operation more difficult because, we can't come out of roll. We got to keep this whole operation now a secret from him, and he's there every day. And he ended up working there for 8 months for the rest of the operation. And
so they walked into the store and were about to rob it, and he got him. They actually came into the location.
Oh yeah, they came in masked up, guns. Yeah, and
you
we're all pulling our shit. Yeah, we were behind the counter. We were in there. We had already. It was late at night. We were just about to close. So we came with our guns out. They had their shit because we could see out the window, and he jumped in the middle because he knew them. They were there earlier that day selling us guns, and yeah. And he did that twice. Wow. And his reward was 20 years in prison. And I even tried. I wrote about that in the book, though. I went up on the stand.
Yeah, no, I remember reading that. That was that's comparable to just liking a guy that saves your life during your undercover, but you're at the end of it, you're the police. And
that's right.
U.S. Attorney's Office wouldn't help him out. They wouldn't, give him a sentencing recommendation.
They tried. The judge wasn't having it. They put me up on the stand and gave it a shot. And the judge looked at me, and this old Georgia, federal judge, man. He said, "Guess what?" He goes, "That defendant was not helping you because you're a law enforcement officer. He was helping you because he thought you were a gangster, just like he is." 20 years.
Gina G, thank you for the $5 super chat. She says, great guest, Lou Valoze, on tonight's show. Where can your book be purchased? Is it out on Amazon, Lou?
Yeah, and go on Amazon. Just Google Storefront Sting. It'll come right up on Amazon.
Yeah, we played the trailer for this early. Here's the book right here. Lou, you got really nice ink, man. And I read in the book that you had some really bad tattoo artists doing your tats.
Just
You had a Hell's
terrible.
Angel. You had a sex offender doing your tats.
A convicted child molester. Yeah,
Oh,
there was a
man.
point. There was a point in my career where I was drunk and I was laying on a filthy pool table while this outlaw biker was 1%er was giving me a terrible tattoo on my arm here, and I remember, a moment of clarity, thinking, I came from a good family. I went to college. What the hell am I doing? I should be home with my wife and kids, man. I'm letting
You went
this
to
guy
a good. You went to Lafayette. You went to Lafayette in what, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, go Leopards, go Pards.
That's a good school. Yeah, pretty good football, right? I just want to go quick to a commercial. Phil, are you ready to read this?
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com.
Very cool. Lou.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I want to tell you guys. I just want to say that. So, I went back and I watched a whole bunch of your shows, and I loved them, man. I mean, I almost stayed up. I stayed up to about 3 a.m. watching your shows, and I thought.
Thank you.
And I thought about it, and the reason why, and I truly believe this, is because you guys. I mean, you're born for. There's no one better at interviewing than big city detectives, right? If you want a good interview done, I know when I did, I would call, when I was in LA, I would call LAPD detectives to come do the interview. And you guys, of course, New York, same thing. And it just transfers over to your show. I mean, you're born to do this. Listen, Oprah, all the rest of them, they can't hold a candle, to a detective who knows how to interview people, and it carries over into the show, man. It's just.
Thank you.
Lou, thank you.
Nice
That is very nice.
I
even do a Dr. Phil imitation. What you need to do is to go and don't think that this $60,000 watch I'm wearing has anything to do with me being an asshole.
See, Billy's not only a retired sergeant from the Homicide Squad, he's also a stand-up comedian and actor. He plays instruments, and what else? He's a college professor, and now he's a podcaster. So
that's why I know Lou. I know Lou is destined to become a podcaster.
Actually, so my book has been optioned by a big company out in Hollywood, and for a Netflix type series where each storefront would be a different season. So you would have a different cast of undercovers, like we really did. And each storefront, there's so many stories and plots and twists and turns, with each of these storefront operations, between all the mistakes we made. I mean, just to give you guys just a quick idea, there was just out of control fistfights. Rival gangs would come in, and next thing you know, the whole place erupts, and we got to come out with baseball bats and try and stop all this. We got harassed by the cops because most of the cops didn't know. They just thought we were thugs and operating a thug business. The fire marshal, code enforcement. Just a lot of mistakes were made. There was evictions. We had eviction notices. Even the landlords wanted us out of there eventually. And in the meantime, we're trying to do an investigation, right? We're trying to do an operation. All this other outside stuff's going on. We find we're having trouble identifying people, right? Because, this guy will come in, he'll be selling us a machine gun, but he gets dropped off by, a 21-year-old female who's driving a car that doesn't come back to her, right? And probably a rental or something. And just he's given us some street name. So what we decided, after a while, we're starting getting some defendants, and you can't charge them if you don't know who they are.
Right.
So, we started getting creative and coming up with ideas. So we said, you know what? People will always give you information when you give them something. So we came up with giveaways, right? We'll give away a flat screen TV. So fill out this little form,
That's
give me
great.
name, number, whatever, email, just give me something, some way to reach you. And, a guy would come in and he'd sell me a sawed off shotgun. And I'd say, hey man, they would be right there on the counter. I'd say, fill that out. I'd say, I own this place. I'll make sure you win. Just fold the corner or something. And sure as shit, he'd give a real cell or a real email or something that would allow us to figure out who he was. And we'd make sure he won so we could get him back in. We had bowls of Sharpies and we had, blank walls, and we let him tag the walls. And we ended up cutting out all that drywall as evidence because, they're threatening. We said, no hating up there. But of course, they're threatening each other's lives, with all the gang signs and all that. So we came up with a lot of creative kind of stuff. Each storefront, everything was very different, from a very street operation with a tattoo shop, to a head shop where we were selling paraphernalia, tobacco products. Then we really upped our game and did a military surplus store that had a shooting range attached. ATF was not crazy about that idea, but somehow I talked them into it. Now we got bad guys on camera, convicted felons going in there, blasting their guns. So, and then we took it to the final step where we became freight forwarders. And I actually had to learn how to be a freight forwarder and learn the terminology, because you can't just bullshit your way through that, right? If you don't know the customs forms and you don't know all the terminology, they're going to see right through you, because now we're driving Jaguars and Mercedes and we're dealing with criminal organizations on a much higher level than we were with a tattoo shop with street thugs. And that's kind of how the book goes along, telling the evolution of all this. And I thought that in my mind when I started writing the book. I said, man, this is made for Netflix right here. And
Yeah,
so
great.
hopefully,
Lou, one of the things I just want our listeners to understand is they would have the central store, and attached somewhere in the store was another room where a bunch of other agents would be with all the recording equipment and also backup in case, but they can only back you up if it was really like a death situation, right? Because or else they blow the cover, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was definitely a worst case scenario thing. And I always say, all my years of working undercover, I don't care how good your cover team, your cover team is there to avenge your death, because you're doing an undercover deal. If they have it in mind, that they're going to kill you, there's no cover team that's going to get in fast enough before they can pull that trigger.
Right.
Great point.
That's just reality.
Yeah. Did I hear you right that you actually got tattoos as part of your work? So that's dedication. I mean, yeah. I don't know too many undercovers that have done that.
And they were bad, like real bad. Yeah.
Do you still wear them? You still have them?
I still got them. Yeah, I got a lot of them all over. Yeah.
Now, will the ATF pay to get them removed or no?
No. That ship sailed, man. Yeah.
All right.
Lou, I loved when you were posing as like a UFC fighter and you were like, shit, I hope I don't get a fight because I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me, right?
It's the bad guy. That's, he was going to sponsor. He was getting me sponsors. And, it was eventually to be set up where, all his auto mafia guys, they were going to be there. And I had to wear the robe with whatever, Tony's Pizza and all that. And, the whole time I'm thinking, man, I hope this case comes to a close before I got to step in the ring with a real fighter and get my ass kicked. Right. Yeah. Training at the gym was bad enough. Yeah.
The tattoo is bad enough, right?
I mean, the tattoo is, it's for life, man. And I came home, my wife would look at it and she, oh, that's awful. That's terrible.
A lot of long sleeve shirts in your closet.
Exactly. That's right.
Lou, let me ask you something now. With this behind you, you're a retired ATF agent. Do you have any PTSD from this stuff, you think?
I think that I did. And I think I've dealt with it. My career did not end well. I ended my career being under investigation by the OIG. And, I waited till it was all over and cleared and everything was cleared before I retired. But, it wasn't a good ending to my career. Certainly not the way I wanted it to end. Right. And, I had come to a point in my career where at the culmination of a lot of these big operations, I was believing my own bullshit, right? I was receiving all these awards and all these accolades. OCDF Case of the Year, the Department of Justice Project Safe Neighborhood Gang Investigation of the Year, Gun Crime Investigation of the Year, U.S. Attorney's Office Law Enforcement Officer of the Year. But you know what awards I wasn't receiving? Father of the Year, Husband of the Year, Friend of the Year. My priorities were out the window. And, you know, that nonstop undercover life, when you start believing, I was Sal Nunziato, that was my undercover identity. You know, and I was walking around acting and talking like Sal Nunziato more than Lou Velozi. Believing my own shit when I had kids and a wife at home, you know, but I'm out saving the world. So everything crashed. And when all that happened, definitely there was some PTSD, but I addressed it, man. I went and, you know, got therapy. And, you know, first time.
Because, you know, Lou, I'm not asking that to be like drill into your personal background,
No,
but I think we all have it, you know.
No doubt.
Phil,
Yeah.
you know, you do law enforcement for over 20. I did almost 27. Phil did 22. I think I have a piece of, you know, there's that part of you that there's some fear, you know, there's fear that because you understand what can happen. Like there's a lot of people that have never seen someone get shot or never seen the results of someone getting stabbed or see the results of someone hit with a baseball bat. We've seen all of that stuff, and it's not the healthiest thing to see. It doesn't help you sleep at night. I'll put it that way, you know.
Or see 210-story collapsed buildings on the ground with thousands of people burning inside of it. I mean, that was probably that was definitely my worst day on the job. And I definitely had symptoms of PTSD, and it took me a long time, but I did some therapy, and it helped quite a bit. So there's definitely something to be said about that. And anybody experiencing any nightmares or anything related to PTS, I strongly urge you to put the macho stuff on the side. It took me a couple of years before I did, but it helps. So there's definitely statistics that show just talking about it rather than stuffing it down inside of you, as they say, definitely helped me.
Yeah, guys like us, we don't go to therapy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you know, eventually, when you got to come to face reality, and it helps, you know, because, and to me, the toughest job in law enforcement is just wearing a uniform and being on patrol. Like those are the guys I have the most respect for, especially the men and women who do it for 30 years, who just love the street and stay on the street. And, you know, with they see it every day, all day. You know, to me that, you know, if you don't have some issues at the end of that 3-decade run, you're probably not human. Right.
100%.
So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of getting some help, man. You know, get some help so that we can enjoy life in our retirement that we earn, right? So get some help and then enjoy it, man.
Yeah, you know, Lou, we've had a lot of psychologists come on that talk about that, and Dr. Stephen Washkill, who is a suicide prevention doctor, and you know, law enforcement has one of the highest levels of suicide of any profession there is, and we're always. If anyone ever calls us up and says, "Can I come on and talk about suicide?" We're like, "You're booked. When do you want to come on?" You know, I never consider numbers or anything. If someone wants to come on and talk about suicide and they can help other people, you know. But you know, it's look. I really enjoyed the book a lot, and the idea of a storefront sting is so amazing, and the fact, I mean, just the whole underworld of criminals that came in there. And the job you guys did when you took these things down, you know, there's the politics of the anti-law enforcement politics is unbelievable because you were doing an amazing job. You were dropping crime. You were getting guns, getting drugs, getting stolen cars, and putting away all these despicable criminals. But yet, no, you know, you were wearing white socks, you know?
Right.
You know?
And it's, essentially, you know, they you know, I'm not just talking about storefront operations. I'm talking about all law enforcement operations. It seems over the past few years, they've been willing to forego all these proactive enforcement operations that work, that reduce violent crime for political reasons, man. And
Yes.
politics and law enforcement don't go together, man. And now that politics has it's crept into law enforcement, look what it's doing, man. And who's suffering? But the people, the civilians.
That's
who's
right.
suffering.
The public. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
the public. Yep. It's wrong.
Unbelievable.
The people that are the ones that put the politicians in office, that pay their salary, they're the ones that are paying the price, unfortunately. But like you said, I mean, there was always political components to the law enforcement. The mayor's office controls the police department
Right.
to a degree, but there was, you know, if you go back to the 80s, the 90s when we were on, yeah, the mayor was in charge. He fired and hired the police commissioner, but the police department really, the mayor would say, get crime down. And we would get, you know, we would use innovative techniques and, you know, resources and all the things that we did back then. And the one thing that worked that stands out in law enforcement history is the broken windows policy that was instituted by Rudy Giuliani and Jack Makel and Bill Bratton in the NYPD. And it really turned around crime over a period of years. It didn't turn around overnight, but it was really, really something that was effective. It turned around crime. And we went the other way now, and they're afraid to go back to that because of all these civil libertarians and on it goes. And as you said, politics itself.
You know, folks, the book is Storefront Sting. You can get it on Amazon, and you get it now because Lou is about to become a star. He maybe even become a movie star. And if he doesn't become a movie star, he's going to either become a podcaster or a tattoo artist.
Well, listen, when he gets that Netflix series, Billy.
So Lou, I don't want to give you your next profession. Where do you go from here, Lou? What are you looking forward to with the rest of your life now?
Well, you know, I do a lot of. I'm actually, you guys were talking about Joe Castone. I'm doing the Southern California Gang Investigators Conference with Joe and the Narcos guys in San Diego. I think in a month. So I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements, conferences.
Hey, Lou, when you see Joe, tell him to take his sunglasses off at night. All right.
He's hiding a bag, I think. Under his eyes.
He'll never take those. Even when he comes on the show, he has all the lights off in the room. I'm like, Joe, we can't see you.
He wants it that way.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have ever talked to the Narcos guys, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, the guys.
We haven't, but I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
Bring them on.
I'll make the introduction. You couldn't get two better guys, man. And I'm doing a conference with them in Vegas. So, you know, I love speaking. I love going out and giving. I have a whole presentation I do. I love doing that, and I'm going to put everything into pursuing, you know, what's coming off the book right now, and hopefully with this series, and I'll be able to, you know, be a on scene consultant for that. But you know, I have learned that nothing in Hollywood happens fast. Holy cow, it's slow.
Oh,
it's not like the way we work.
We know that story from Tommy Dades. With we're doing a show tomorrow night. Actually, it's a part 2 with a book called Friends of the Family that Tommy and Joe Ponzi and Michael Vecchione wrote about. We had 2 NYPD detectives that were actually doing contract murders for the Lucchese crime family in New York for gas pipe queso. They were on his payroll. So the largest corruption scandal in the history of the NYPD, and it's still stalled. They bought rights and then it just expired. They bought the the rights to the book numerous times, but there's something in the works now. They're hoping it gets done. But you're right, the wheels of Hollywood turn very slowly. Absolutely.
There's some strange people out there. Like they'll call me and they'll be like, "Listen, you know, the holidays are coming up, so no one's going to do anything probably for the next month or so." And I'm like, "What kind of business is this? Are you kidding me? If I operated like that, I would have been fired."
But Lou, you know what I learned when they say, "We want you to do this." The next word out of your mouth is, "How much?"
Exactly.
How much you going to pay me? Because they want everything for free. They try to get law enforcement to do shit for free. My next thing is out of my mouth is, "How much you paying me?" Oh, you want money?
That weeds out all the bullshit artists.
Yeah, you know? I said, I get $500 a day plus expenses just for you to talk to me, or else let me get off the phone now. You know,
right? Yeah, there's not many checks coming out of Hollywood. They're all coming into Hollywood. That's the truth.
Yeah, that's for sure. Philly, last words.
Last words, Lou Veloze. Very, very nice to have met you. I just hope and pray that you get that series done. That sounds like that's going to be great. I mean, just talking with you the short time that we had tonight, you did God's work, as they say, and thank God you're here to tell us about it. And I'm glad that you touched on the points about that. You get caught up in it, you get addicted to it, and unfortunately, your family and your friends pay for it. But you're retired now, and hopefully, you can turn things around and enjoy the rest of eternity in your life. And maybe with the some of the funds, if you do get that Netflix series, maybe you could get some of those tattoos erased if you want. Sure, your wife will be happy. But
Right.
good luck with everything, Lou. And you got to come on again. And I think that somewhere down the line, Bill's right. There could be a good podcast future for you. And just keep it in the back of your mind.
Well, thank you guys for your service. First of all, and thank you guys for having me, man. It was a blast, and I would love to come back. Hopefully, I'll be signing on.
Lou, you have an open invitation, and I know your last name is pronounced Veloze. Phil wasn't listening to that trailer,
Wait,
and he's Italian too.
It can't be
Veloze. It's Veloze.
How do you say it,
Velozi?
Velozi.
Velozi. That's what I said. I'm Italian.
You said Valoze like a shadrul.
I might have said that. It's Velozi. That's Velozi. It can't be Veloze as French. There'd have to be a hyphen for it to be Veloze.
Right. Like a lot of Italians, when my family came over, so the spelling of my name is Vellozzi. But when they came in, it was Americanized. They tried to Americanize it. So.
They cut a lot of the names down. It was too hard to spell and pronounce, so they'd name you after the town you came. We're talking about my grandfather, 1918, when he came, but they kept their names intact. But a lot of people, like my friend Greg Marcini, his grandfather was Lago Marcini, and they just cut off the Lago and they threw in Marcini, so that's what his name turned out being.
Well, my name was Cannon, and it still is.
There you go.
Big gun Cannon.
Big guns. That's right. Cannon law.
Yeah.
So, Lou, thank you so much. All you folks listening tonight, thank you so much for being in the audience. If you're not subscribed, your friends are Lou. Subscribe to Police Off the Cuff on our YouTube. And Lou, you have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come back, just give us a call.
Great show, man. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
One episode